Some things in this world are so rotten, so twisted, they make a good man wonder why God ever let certain folks be born. And that thought stayed in Thomas Graves' head the summer of 1893, when the land outside Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, was hot enough to break your spirit, the kind of heat where even lizards didn't bother moving, where the air sat so heavy on your chest it felt like the desert itself was pressing down on you. And that's where he found her, under a juniper tree, looking less like a person and more like something discarded, a bundle of bones and bruises wrapped in a filthy blanket. Eyes so empty they made him colder than war ever had. Because you can fight a man with a gun, but you can't fight that kind of hollow inside a human soul. She looked up at him, lips cracked, voice like gravel scraping over wind, and said the words that would haunt him long after. "I'm filthy inside and out." And she didn't need to explain a damn thing. Her skin told it all, and he didn't ask, didn't press, just dropped his coat and scooped her up, because sometimes you don't do what's noble or even smart. You just do the only thing that lets you keep calling yourself a man. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, only knew she wasn't going back alone to whatever hell spat her out. And as the horse carried them back to his ranch, she leaned against him, eyes shut but trembling like her body hadn't gotten the message that maybe, just maybe, she was safe for the first time in God knows how long. His ranch was a lonely place. Broken fences, windows covered in dust, no neighbors to pry or gossip, just silence. And in that silence he laid her on a cot, set down a clean dress that once belonged to his wife, and stepped outside to smoke while the sky turned the color of rust, wondering if she'd run or scream or smash the place apart. But she didn't. By dawn he found her sitting in the barn, clutching a sack of feed like it was the last soft thing she'd ever hold. When she finally spoke, she asked for a comb, and when he handed it to her, she worked through her matted hair, then looked him square in the face and said, "Why didn't you touch me?" He didn't flinch, didn't look away, just answered, "Because no one should have." And that cracked something inside her, not tears but a quiver in her lip that spoke louder than any sob. That night, she stayed by the fire instead of the barn, and though the coyotes howled and the wind scratched the cabin walls, for the first time she wasn't alone. But peace is fragile, and out here it never lasts. On the fourth morning he told her he was riding into a bee coup for supplies, and when he turned she was already pulling on a worn boot, quiet but determined to follow. The town wasn't much, but it had eyes that cut like knives, and the moment they stepped out of the general store, trouble found them. Trouble with a red face and liquor on his breath, grinning like he owned the world and everything in it, especially her. "Pretty little thing ran off before payday," he sneered, and Thomas didn't ask what deal or what lie. Didn't ask anything at all, just hit him so hard his boots left the porch. Folks watched, nobody helped, and the man spat blood with a grin that promised worse. "My brother runs this county. Old man, you'll both be ghosts before the week's out." They left town in silence, but the words followed them like a curse, and that night by the fire, she whispered, "It's coming, isn't it?" Thomas poured her a drink, nodded once, and said, "Yeah, it's coming." And he was right. Within days, tracks followed them through the mountains, clean, deliberate, hunters not travelers. He set traps, slept light, listened for smoke that wasn't theirs, until one night a snare caught the first man, snapping his leg like a twig. Thomas dragged him off the trail, asked who sent him, but the bastard just laughed through the blood. She saw things that weren't meant to leave that house. That night the gunfire started, echoing through canyons, close enough to make the horses scream. And Thomas knew this wasn't survival anymore. It was war. By dawn, only one man was left standing, blood on his sleeve, smoke in his chest. And when she looked at him like she didn't know whether to thank him or fear him, he answered before she asked, "I live for you first." That should have been the end, but it wasn't, because she hadn't told him everything yet, and when it came out, it would change them both. Weeks passed in the high country, where the air was cleaner and the sky stretched forever. Together they built a cabin from rough logs, no paint, no porch, but it stood. She dug the post holes, cooked simple meals, sat by the fire in a silence that wasn't heavy but healing, until one evening, As the sun dropped behind the ridge, she said softly, "That girl under that tree, she's gone." And Thomas stared at the fire before turning to her with words simple as they were final. "Then I'm proud to have buried her and to have met the woman sitting here now." There were no grand gestures, no kiss in the rain, just a nod, a small smile, two people scarred in different ways finding the same light. They never went back to town, never gave explanations, because sometimes the world doesn't need your story, it just needs you to survive it. And maybe that's the story after all, that for every man who turns his back on what's right, there's another who still knows when to act. And for every woman broken by fear and bruises, there's still a path that leads somewhere new. Even if it's carved in blood and silence. Oh, let me ask you this. If you were the one who found her under that tree, what would you have done? Turned away and kept your hands clean? Or stepped forward even if nobody saw it but God? You know what I mean? Because out here in the wild, good men still ride, and some stories, like this one, deserve to be remembered. Backhand index pointing right now, it's your turn. Drop your thoughts below. Was Thomas right to take her in, to fight her battles, or should he have walked away? Where does justice end and survival begin? Let's hear it. Funny thing about peace, it never asks permission before it leaves. It just slips out the back door one night when you're too tired to notice. And that's exactly what happened to Thomas and Ida up there in the high country. They thought the cabin meant safety, thought the silence meant the world had forgotten them. But the world never forgets. Not when men with power have been shamed, not when money's on the line. One morning, Thomas found a mark carved into a tree near the creek. Just a simple slash at first glance, but he knew better. It was a sign, a hunter's whisper, a message. We know where you are. He didn't tell Ida right away. No point breaking her calm before it was necessary. But his eyes started scanning the ridgelines again. His rifle leaned a little closer by the door. And then came the twist he never expected. A rider showed up at dusk, not a gunman, not an enemy, but a boy. Couldn't have been more than 16, skinny, with a voice still caught between youth and manhood. He didn't draw his weapon, just raised a hand and called out for Thomas by name, which set every nerve in his body on edge because strangers didn't know his name unless someone told them. The boy said his name was Caleb, said he'd been sent not by the men who wanted Ida dragged back, but by Thomas's own brother, the one he hadn't spoken to in years. He says you're in over your head, and he's coming. The boy stammered, looking like he half regretted delivering the message. Now, Thomas didn't talk much about his brother, but Ida could read the storm in his face, jaw tight, hand trembling just enough to make the boy flinch. That night, Thomas finally broke the silence, told her about a brother who'd traded family for power, a lawman who wasn't really about law, a man who made himself king of a county by knowing who to bury and who to buy. If he's coming, Thomas muttered, then this fight's already bigger than us. Ida listened, didn't interrupt, then said something that knocked the wind out of him. I'm not running anymore, she said, her voice steady in a way he hadn't heard before. They took everything once. They won't take me again. Not while I can still choose. And Thomas, who'd spent his life carrying other people's burdens, realized she wasn't a broken soul waiting for rescue anymore. She was someone ready to stand, ready to fight. Days later, the brother rode in, not with an army, not even with deputies, just with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the land bends to you. He stepped off his horse, boots crunching the dirt outside the cabin, and for the first time in years, Thomas faced him eye to eye. No hugs, no greetings, just a stare as cold as the steel hanging at their sides. You think you can hide her here? The brother said, voice calm but heavy with threat. She belongs to men who pay better than your pride ever will. Hand her over, and you might even get to keep your skin. Thomas didn't answer right away, just looked at Ida, standing in the doorway behind him, hair brushed, eyes alive. And in that second the choice was already made. He stepped forward, close enough to smell the trail dust on his brother's coat, and said the words slow and low. She doesn't belong to anyone. Not them, not you. And if you try to take her, you better be ready to bury me. The standoff stretched, the kind of silence where the whole world holds its breath, waiting to see who draws first. And for a moment, even the wind stopped moving through the trees. The boy Caleb stood off to the side, wide-eyed, torn between two men whose blood ran the same, but whose hearts had split long ago. And then, just like that, the brother smiled, not warmth but a cutthroat grin, and turned his back to leave, saying only, "This isn't finished." That night, Ida sat by the fire, staring at the flames like they might whisper her future. "You could have let me go," she said softly, not accusing, just wondering. Thomas shook his head, tossed another log on the fire, and muttered, "And you could have given up a long time ago, but you didn't." Guess neither of us knows how to quit. The cabin held their silence, but it wasn't heavy, it was charged, like thunder waiting in the clouds. They knew what was coming, knew the land would bring more riders, more blood, maybe even his brother's hand on the trigger next time. But they also knew something else, that whatever broke them before had been buried out there in the desert, under that juniper tree, and what stood now was different, stronger, unwilling to kneel again. And here's the thing, some stories don't end with victory or defeat. They just hang in that space between, where you're still standing, still breathing, still waiting for the next storm. That's where Thomas and Ida were left, staring into the fire, not knowing if tomorrow brought peace or war, only knowing they'd face it together. So tell me, if blood was the price of freedom, would you pay it? Would you stand your ground against your own kin if it meant protecting someone who had nothing left but you? Or would you walk away and call it survival? Yeah, think about that. Backhand index pointing right, drop your thoughts below. Whose side are you on, Thomas's or his brother's? And how far should a man go when family stands on the wrong side of the line?